They said mountain chickens were only good for two things: eggs and noise. The day Mara's hen laid a blue-green egg the color of glacial water, the valley birds went silent, the wind dropped like someone had closed a door, and for a long, suspended heartbeat, it felt as though the whole mountain was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do. Mara almost dropped it the moment she picked it up. It was still warm, soft heat soaking into her calloused palm. But that wasn't what startled her. It was the color, not the soft brown or mottled cream she was used to finding in the rough straw box beside the coop, not even the pale blue some fancy town breeds could produce. This was something else entirely, deep teal, like a river seen at dusk, with faint veins of darker green swirling through the shell, as if tiny currents were moving beneath the surface. For a second, she thought it was some kind of trick of the light, sun slipping through the pines, playing games with her tired eyes. She turned it slowly. The color didn't change. Her hen, a scruffy brown bird she'd rescued from a closing farm auction, stood on the edge of the nesting box staring at her with a look that felt far too deliberate for poultry. "What did you do, Hope?" Mara whispered. She hadn't named the bird for nothing. The chicken tilted her head, feathers ruffling with quiet pride, as if she understood perfectly well that she'd just broken a rule older than the farm itself. Mara's first instinct was purely practical. She lived alone on the mountainside and had long ago learned that survival didn't care much for magic. Eggs were food. Food kept her alive. But as she stood there, the cold morning air biting the tip of her nose, she realized she couldn't bring herself to crack it. It felt wrong, like smashing a delicate piece of sky against the edge of a pan. So instead, she carried it very carefully back to the cabin, cradling it in both hands the way other people might carry something as fragile as a heartbeat. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than usual, walls lined with shelves of jars, coils of rope, tools hanging from hooks. The fire in the stone hearth had died overnight. Only ashy embers remained. Mara set the egg gently in a chipped ceramic bowl on the table, then crouched to coax the fire back to life. Flames caught, licking up the kindling. Light grew, soft and golden. When she straightened again, the egg seemed even brighter by contrast, its cool tone standing out against the warm ones around it. "You're getting superstitious in your old age," she muttered to herself, though at 38 she knew she wasn't old, just worn in the way mountains make a person. Still, she didn't move it, didn't cook it. Instead, she made coffee, sat at the table, and watched it like it might decide to do something if she looked away. The mountain outside the window was its usual winter self, dark evergreens, patches of old snow clinging to the shaded slopes, low clouds snagged on rocky peaks. Nothing seemed different, yet something felt different, like a note in the air she couldn't hear but somehow felt vibrating along her bones. She reached out on impulse, pressing her fingertips lightly to the shell. It was smooth, cool now, and completely still. No movement inside. No sound. Just an egg. "Of course," she said under her breath. "Just an egg." Hope clucked loudly outside as if offended by the dismissal. Mara took that as a sign she'd been sitting still too long. Mountain life didn't leave much space for staring at breakfast. There was frozen firewood to split, goats to check, a frozen pipe under the porch to deal with before the next cold snap. She pulled on her jacket, slid her feet into worn boots, grabbed her gloves from the hook, and hesitated. Her gaze snagged again on the bowl. Something in her chest tightened. Against better judgment, she took an old wool hat from the chair, folded it into a makeshift nest, and very carefully wrapped the blue-green egg in it. Then she carried it to the bedroom and slid it into the bottom drawer of her wooden chest under a stack of flannel shirts. Safe, hidden, protected from her own impulsive hunger and from whatever story the neighbors might start if they saw it. The nearest human soul lived a 30-minute walk down the slope. An elderly hunter named Vern, who liked gossip nearly as much as he liked solitude. If he heard she had a hen laying impossible eggs, half the town would know by the end of the week. And Mara wasn't ready to share this. Not yet. The day unfolded with the usual rhythm. She split wood until her shoulders burned pleasantly. She shoveled a path to the well. She checked the traps deeper in the trees, releasing 2 squirrels and resetting 1 empty snare. She fixed the hinge on the outhouse door that the wind had torn loose. Ordinary chores, ordinary aches. Yet the world felt subtly off-center, as if a new gravity point had appeared in the cabin drawer, and everything else was now quietly tilting toward it. Around noon, as she returned from the tree line with an armful of kindling, she saw Vern trudging up the path, his orange hunting cap bright against the muted forest. "Wasn't expecting company," she muttered, more to herself than anyone, but she raised a hand in greeting. Vern approached with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who'd spent a lifetime walking on ice and scree. His beard was more white than gray now. His eyes, though, were sharp as ever. "Morning," he said, looking past her toward the coop. "Your hen's been making a racket all day. Thought a fox might be nosing around." Mara frowned. "She's loud, but not usually that loud." Vern nodded, squinting. "Some things stir animals up. Storms, quakes, strange smells. Heard the coyotes howling all at once at sunrise. Whole valley woke up to that." He said it lightly, but his gaze lingered on her face like he was checking if she knew more than she let on. Mara kept her expression neutral. "Didn't hear a thing. Must have been dead asleep." A lie. She had been very much awake, fingers closed around something warm and impossible. Vern sniffed. "Well, guess it's nothing. Just felt odd. Like the mountain took a deep breath and forgot to let it out." His casual words mirrored the feeling she'd had earlier, so exactly that goosebumps prickled her arms beneath the jacket. She forced a laugh. "Maybe you're getting poetic in your old age." "Old age is when you finally notice the things that were always there," he grumbled. "You coming down to town next week? Supply trucks due?" "Maybe," she said. "Depends on the weather." "And on whether I'm still hiding a miracle in my bottom drawer," she didn't add. Vern gave the coop another long look before stomping off, his boots crunching through thin snow. Hope watched him go, wings slightly flared, body tensed in a way Mara had never seen. Not afraid. Guarding. That night, Mara told herself she wouldn't check the egg. She would read by lantern light, drink tea, listen to the old battery-powered radio if the reception behaved. She made it until the sky outside was fully dark and the fire had burned low, ember red, before curiosity bent her will like a green branch. She lit a smaller lamp and carried it to the bedroom, heart hammering for reasons she stubbornly refused to name. The drawer slid open with a soft creak. The wool hat lay where she'd left it. For a heartbeat, she was sure the egg would be gone, dissolved into air like a strange dream. But when she pulled back the folds of fabric, there it was. The blue-green shell seemed deeper in the lamplight, as though the color had thickened. It looked heavier. She picked it up carefully. Yes, heavier. Not by a lot, but enough for her calloused fingers to notice. "That's not how this works," she murmured. She had raised chickens for years. Eggs didn't gain weight after being laid. They didn't darken either. And yet, on a reckless impulse, Mara held the egg close to her ear the way she had as a child, half expecting to hear ocean waves inside a shell. Instead, she heard something else. So faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it. A rhythm. Not quite a heartbeat. Not quite anything she recognized. A slow, pulsing thrum that seemed to match the distant rush of the river beneath the mountain. She jerked it away, breath catching. The sound stopped. Slowly, she raised it again. There. Still there. She stood frozen for a long time, the world narrowing to the fragile weight in her hands and the strange, steady beat inside it. She thought of smashing it, just to make the fear disappear. She thought of taking it back outside, leaving it in the forest, letting the mountain reclaim whatever it had sent. Instead, she did the most dangerous thing of all. She kept it. Days blurred, then sorted themselves into a new pattern. Every morning, Hope laid one ordinary egg, sometimes two. And every 3 days, as the sky shifted from pewter to clear, another blue-green egg appeared in the nest, perfect and impossible. Mara hid them all in the same drawer, wrapped in soft cloth. By the end of the first week, there were 3. By the end of the second, 5. Each one felt slightly heavier than the last, the pulsing rhythm inside them almost, but not quite, synchronized. Like different instruments learning to play the same song. The rest of her life continued, repairing fences, trading cheese and firewood in town, avoiding questions about why she seemed more distracted than usual. But internally, something was unraveling, or weaving itself into a shape she didn't yet recognize. She found herself talking less to the radio and more to the eggs, whispering half-formed thoughts as she worked in the cabin. "You picked the wrong woman," she'd mutter while stirring stew. "I don't know how to be chosen for anything." Hope watched her with bright, unblinking eyes, always present, always near the cabin when a new egg appeared. Once, when Mara was slow to collect it, the hen actually pecked at her boot until she followed, then stepped aside like a messenger fulfilling her duty. By the 3rd week, the valley noticed. Not the eggs, not yet, but the way animals behaved. Vern stopped by again to return a borrowed axe and mentioned he'd seen a flock of crows circling the ridge without landing, something he'd never observed in 40 years on this mountain. A neighbor from further down the slope claimed his old hound refused to go outside after sunset, whining at the door like a nervous pup. "There's a pressure in the air," Vern said, squinting toward the peaks. "Like before a storm, but the sky is clear. You feel it?" Mara swallowed. She did. Every night her dreams were filled with the sound of distant wings and the taste of cold metal on her tongue. Every morning she woke up with the certainty that the mountain was watching her more closely than usual. "Just winter," she lied. "Everything feels heavier in winter." She thought she was the only human who knew the truth, or at least a fraction of it, until the day she returned from checking the creek and found her bedroom drawer open. Her heart stopped. The eggs sat in their nest of folded shirts, intact, but someone had clearly been here. The outer shirt was folded differently, the wool hat shifted. Panic surged, cold and sharp. She grabbed her rifle from the wall and did a quick sweep of the cabin and immediate yard. No one. Only Hope, pecking calmly near the porch. "Did you see anyone?" she demanded, feeling ridiculous the moment the words left her mouth. Hope just blinked. That night, Mara slept with the rifle within reach and a chair wedged beneath the door handle, an old habit from a different life she'd tried to leave behind. Sometime in the dead quiet of dawn, when even the creek seemed to hold its breath, She woke to a soft glow seeping from the edges of the drawer. For a disoriented second, she thought the cabin was on fire. Then she realized the light wasn't orange. It was the same deep teal as the shells, filtering through the wood as if the drawer itself had turned translucent. Her lungs forgot how to work. Slowly, her bare feet chilled by the floorboards, she crossed the room and eased the drawer open. The eggs lay in their nest, uncracked, unchanged in shape. But the air around them hummed, a barely audible tone that sank straight into her bones. Light seemed to bleed from the shells, not bright, but intense, like the glow of deep water seen at night. The rhythm she'd heard before was louder now, beating like distant drums underground. For a brief, wild moment, she thought she saw shapes moving inside the shells, shadows, coils, something stretching, unfurling. No, she whispered, though she didn't know what she was refusing. No to danger, no to change, no to being pulled into something bigger than herself. As if in answer, the hum rose, then faded. The light dimmed and vanished, leaving only 5 ordinary-looking eggs the color of a stormy sea. The cabin felt dark in comparison, oppressive. She sank onto the edge of the bed, shaking. For the first time since Hope had laid that first impossible egg, Mara allowed herself to wonder if this wasn't a gift at all. What if it was a warning? Or a countdown? The mountain outside remained silent, as if waiting to see what she would decide to do next. Mara had always believed the mountains spoke in small, quiet ways, shifts in the wind, cracks in the snow, the low groaning of trees settling into winter. But the days after she discovered the blue-green egg felt different. The whole forest seemed to breathe around her, carrying secrets she wasn't sure she was meant to know. And every morning without fail, the chicken, her stubborn, wiry, cinnamon-feathered hen named Bristle, brought her another egg, unlike anything Mara had seen in all her years on the mountain. Each one glowed softly beneath sunlight, as if holding a piece of sky inside its shell. At first, Mara tried to convince herself there must be some natural explanation. A mineral in the soil, a strange plant the chicken had eaten. Something simple, something logical. But logic didn't explain the warmth of the eggs, or how they pulsed faintly in her palm. It didn't explain how Bristle behaved, protective, yet strangely proud, as if she herself didn't understand what she'd laid, only that it mattered. And it certainly didn't explain what Mara heard the first night after collecting the 3rd egg, a faint hum beneath the floorboards, subtle as breath, steady as a heartbeat. Mara shot upright in bed, heart pounding. The cabin was dark, the fire in the stove long since collapsed into coals. The hum vibrated through the wood, threading up through her blankets. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and lit a lantern. The moment light touched the floor, the hum softened, retreating like a creature startled by flame. Mara followed it to the kitchen table where the 3 eggs sat nestled in a cloth bowl. She approached slowly. The hum grew louder. Bristle, roosting on a beam above, let out a low, uneasy cluck. "No," Mara whispered. "This isn't possible." She touched the nearest egg. Heat radiated instantly through her fingertips, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, like another living being. The egg moved, just a twitch, small, quick, but real. Mara staggered back, knocking the lantern against the table. Bristle fluttered her wings in alarm. Mara pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to quiet her own breathing. You're alive." She didn't know whether she was speaking to the egg, the chicken, or herself. The next morning, she wrapped each egg carefully in cloth and placed them inside a wooden crate by the stove for warmth. She had raised chicks before, dozens of them over the years, but nothing like this. The shells were too thick, too glassy. No chicken she'd ever known laid eggs that shifted color under sunlight like a river stone pulled from deep water. Bristle stayed close, pacing nervously around the crate, glancing at Mara as if expecting her to do something she didn't yet understand. By afternoon, the forest changed again. The wind dropped. The birds went silent. Even the brook behind the cabin seemed to hush. Mara stepped outside, scanning the tree line. She felt watched, not by predators, not by humans, but by the mountain itself. The air vibrated faintly, a tension she recognized only from storms that brewed for days before breaking. But the sky was clear, the sun sharp. Nothing moved except Bristle, who stood in the doorway, feathers ruffled, staring past Mara into the woods as though waiting for something. Or someone. That night she barely slept. The eggs hummed softly, a sound Mara couldn't ignore. When exhaustion finally dragged her into dreams, they were fever-bright and unsettling. She saw flashes of pale shapes moving through the forest, creatures darting between trees with feathers glowing like lanterns. She saw Bristle standing on a cliff edge, her wings that shouldn't exist, spreading wide in the moonlight. And beneath it all, she heard the same hum as the eggs, rising, building, becoming a song that pulled at something deep inside her chest. She woke just before sunrise to a cracking sound. Mara bolted upright. The crate, the eggs. She stumbled across the cabin, tripping over her boots. A jagged line ran down the center of the nearest egg, glowing bright white. Bristle hopped forward, clucking sharply, feathers puffed out like a mother ready to fight anything. Mara held her breath. Crack. Another piece broke away, but instead of a beak or wing emerging, a soft, swirling light spilled through the opening, like mist, but thicker, alive, drifting upward as if weightless. "What?" Mara whispered. She reached out instinctively, but the mist recoiled, swirling like a startled animal, then dissolved into the air. Nothing remained inside the eggshell. No creature. No movement. Just a hollow shell faintly warm to the touch. Mara stared, speechless. Bristle looked up at her with round, worried eyes. "That's not how eggs hatch," Mara muttered. Understatement didn't begin to cover it. The other two eggs cracked next. One released a mist tinged with soft blue. The last glowed green before evaporating. When all three had opened, the cabin felt different, charged, restless. Bristle hopped nervously from foot to foot, repeatedly glancing toward the window. Mara followed her gaze and froze. Something outside moved. Not an animal, not a person. A shimmer, like heat rising from rock, but colder, more deliberate. It drifted between the trees, its outline just barely visible, like a creature made of air and light. Mara grabbed her coat and her axe, not because she thought she could fight whatever was out there, but because empty hands felt too vulnerable. Bristle darted past her, out the door, feathers tight to her body. "Bristle!" Mara hissed. But the hen didn't stop. She sprinted after her, boots crunching frost. At the tree line, the shimmer paused, turning, or seeming to turn, toward them. For one breathless moment, Mara saw something inside the shape. Faint hints of feathers, a suggestion of wings, but nothing fully formed. A half-being, unfinished. The shimmering shape drifted closer. Bristle didn't run. Instead, she stepped forward, body low, eyes locked on the floating light. A breeze stirred the edges of the shape, as though it were held together by the thinnest threads. Mara lifted her axe slightly, not as a threat, but as a brace for whatever might happen. The shape flickered. Then, as if carried by some invisible current, It split into 3 smaller streams of light. Each one glowed a different color: blue, green, white, the same colors that had lifted from the eggs. Mara's breath hitched. The lights moved toward Bristle. She stepped back, but only once, then held her ground. The glowing threads circled her gently, weaving around her feathers. Then, they sank into her, vanished, absorbed. Bristle shuddered. Mara lunged forward, dropping her axe, scooping the hen into her arms. "Bristle! Bristle, look at me!" The chicken trembled violently for several seconds. Then, slowly, her breathing steadied. Her eyes blinked open, clearer, brighter than before. Mara carried her inside, hands shaking. She set her gently on a blanket by the stove. Something had changed. Bristle moved normally, no limp, no pain. But something in the way she held her head, the alert tilt of her body, felt wrong, too aware, too focused. As Mara watched, Bristle stretched her wings. They looked ordinary at first, brown, speckled, familiar. Then she shifted slightly, and a faint shimmer passed across her feathers, like light catching hidden metal. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. Over the next days, Bristle behaved almost normally. Almost. She followed Mara everywhere, as if guarding her. She scratched at the ground not for food, but as though sensing vibrations. Some nights she refused to sleep, pacing in front of the cabin door until dawn. And Mara could no longer shake the feeling that the mountain was holding its breath. The wind blew differently. The ravens flew in tight circles, restless. Deer avoided the clearing entirely. On the 7th morning, Mara woke to Bristle's frantic squawking. The hen tore at the front door with her claws, feathers bristling like static. Mara threw the door open and froze. The forest was full of shimmering shapes. Dozens, maybe more. They drifted through the trees, silent, glowing faintly in the early light. Some moved like birds, some like foxes. Others had no familiar shape at all. They gathered in a loose ring around her cabin, watching. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. Bristle stepped forward onto the porch, body trembling. With fear or readiness, Mara couldn't tell. The shapes parted slightly, making room. Mara swallowed, her mouth dry. She had never felt so small, not even during the worst storms of her life. "What do you want?" she whispered. The nearest shape paused. It flickered once, then darted toward Bristle. Mara gasped, but the hen didn't move. The light passed through her, not into, but through, like a current using her as a guidepost. A wave of shimmering energy rippled outward, linking the shapes together. The hum from the eggs returned, louder, layered, woven with meaning Mara couldn't understand. Bristle let out a low, throaty sound, a sound no chicken should make. For a moment, the humming shifted in response, like a conversation in a language older than the mountain itself. Then, as swiftly as they had come, the shapes began to rise. Up through the trees, up into the air, up into the bright morning sky, until they vanished like steam. Silence returned, deep, absolute, unnatural. Bristle collapsed. Mara rushed to her, cradling her gently. The hen was breathing, but faintly, like the effort of whatever had happened drained something essential from her. Mara held her close, tears burning her eyes. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm right here." Bristle nuzzled weakly against her arm. Mara looked toward the sky where the beings had vanished, questions swirling inside her. Why her? Why Bristle? What had those eggs been? Over the following days, Bristle recovered slowly, though she never fully returned to who she'd been. The shimmer in her feathers remained. She grew calmer, wiser. Sometimes she would stare into the forest for hours, as though listening to a song only she could hear. Mara kept the cracked eggshells in a small wooden box by her bed, unable to throw them away. They no longer glowed, but they still felt warm, like embers holding on to their last memory of fire. She didn't know what the mountain had given her, or what it had taken, but she knew this. Life on the ridge would never be ordinary again.